Daho Park sat in his small booth high above the main diplomatic hall. His fingers moved across the translation panel as voices filled the air below him. 47 different alien languages waited in his memory banks. Today he would need every single one of them. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 30 years. Most alien species still saw humans as newcomers. Young. Unimportant. Daho did not mind this view. It made his job easier when people forgot he was listening. Through the clear wall of his booth, he watched the delegates arrive. The Kelthani came first. They moved like liquid silver poured into tall, graceful forms. Their leader, High Priestess Zelandra, wore robes that seemed to hold starlight. Behind her walked 12 other Kelthani, each carrying crystal tablets covered in strange writing. Captain Kim Sora stood near the human section. Her uniform was perfect, her back straight. She had told Daho many times that humanity needed to prove itself today. The Kelthani Empire had been silent for 300 years. No one knew why they had agreed to these talks. The ship Harmonies. Edge moved slowly toward the sacred world of Kelthera. Outside the great windows, the planet grew larger. Its surface was covered in cities that looked like they were made of light itself. Ancient towers reached toward space, their tops lost in golden clouds. Security Chief Choi Min-ho walked the halls with his team. His hand never left his weapon. He did not trust aliens, especially ones who had hidden from the galaxy for so long. Daho had heard him say that the Kelthani were planning something.
Min-ho believed every species wanted to destroy humanity before humans grew too strong. Ambassador Vorthak entered the hall last. The crystalline being was 8 feet tall and shaped like a walking diamond. Light moved through his body in patterns
that showed his emotions. Right now, those patterns moved fast and sharp. He was nervous. Daho put on his headset and began his work. The first speeches were formal. Each species spoke about peace and cooperation. The words were pretty but empty. He translated them all without thinking much about them. Then High Priestess Zelandra stood to speak. Her voice was like music, but the words she used were different from standard Kelthani. Daho frowned and checked his language files. Some of the words were not in any database he had. "We come before you not as strangers, but as keepers of memory," she said. "Long have we guarded the sacred words. Long have we waited for the ones who would understand." Her priests began to chant. They held up their crystal tablets and symbols appeared in the air above them. The symbols glowed with soft blue light. They moved and changed like living things. Daho stared at the symbols. Something about them felt familiar. Not familiar, like a language he had studied, but familiar like a half-remembered dream. His head began to hurt. The chanting grew louder. Other delegates shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable. The Vrokan ambassador, a creature covered in scales and spines, actually got up to leave. "The words of making," Zelandra continued. "The words that shape the stars. The words that the predecessors spoke when they walked among us." At the mention of the predecessors, the entire hall went quiet. Every species had legends about them. The ancient ones who had built the stargates, who had left ruins on 1,000 worlds, who had vanished without explanation millions of years ago. The Kelthani chanting reached a peak. The symbols in the air began to spin faster. Daho felt something deep in his mind respond to the sound. It was like hearing his name called from far away. "Morthak Villani, Sothkalarnem," the priest chanted. Without thinking, Daho whispered something back. The words came from somewhere deep inside him. He did not know what they meant, but they felt right. They felt necessary. "Vash Morthak, Kayla Sothnamani." The chanting stopped. Every eye in the hall turned toward his booth. High Priestess Zelandra's silver face showed something that might have been shock. Ambassador Vorthak's crystal body flashed bright red. Captain Sora looked up at him with wide eyes. The silence stretched like a held breath. Daho realized his translation microphone was still on. Every word he had whispered had been broadcast to the entire diplomatic assembly. "What did you just say?" Captain Sora asked through his private channel. Her voice was tight with worry. Deho opened and closed his mouth. He had no answer. He did not know what he had said. He did not even know what language it was, High Priestess. Zelandra moved toward his booth. Her steps were slow and careful, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. The other Kelthani followed her, their crystal tablets now glowing so bright they hurt to look at. "Turn off your microphone, Captain," Sora ordered. "Now." Deho reached for the controls, but his hands were shaking. The words he had spoken still echoed in his mind. They meant something important, something that made his chest tight with fear and excitement. Ambassador Vorthak spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. "The session is suspended. All delegates will return to their quarters immediately." Security Chief Minho appeared at Deho's booth door with 2 guards. "Sir, you need to come with us." "I don't understand what happened," Deho said. The words came to me. I had to say them." Minho's expression was grim. "That's what we're going to find out." As they escorted him from the booth, Deho saw High Priestess Zelandra still staring at him. Her silver features showed no emotion, but her hands trembled as she held her crystal tablet. The symbols above the Kelthani priests had not disappeared. They still hung in the air, spinning slowly, and as Deho walked past them, they pulsed with light in rhythm with his heartbeat. In his small quarters, Deho sat on his narrow bed and tried to understand what had happened. He was just a translator. He spoke alien languages for diplomats who were too important to learn them themselves. He was not special. He was not chosen for anything, but the words had come from somewhere. And when he closed his eyes, he could still see those glowing symbols, still feel them calling to something deep inside his mind, something that had been sleeping there his entire life, something that was now beginning to wake up. The knock on Deho's door came at dawn. Captain Sora stood outside with 2 Kelthani guards. Their silver faces showed no emotion, but their crystal tablets glowed with soft light. "They want to see you," Sora said. Her voice was tight. "The High Council is waiting." Deho followed them through corridors that seemed different now. The walls held patterns he had never noticed before, lines and curves that looked almost like writing. When he stared at them, his head began to hurt again. The council chamber was enormous. 12 Kelthani sat in a circle around a pool of still water. High Priestess Zelandra stood at the center. When Deho entered, she bowed her head. "Speak again," she said simply. "I don't know what you want me to say," Deho replied. "The words you spoke yesterday. Say them again." Deho tried to remember, but the words felt distant now, like trying to recall a dream after waking. "I don't remember them." One of the council members leaned forward. His voice was old and deep. "You spoke the first tongue, the language of the predecessors. No living being has spoken those words for 1,000,000 years." The water in the pool began to glow. Images appeared on its surface. Deho saw stars being born, planets forming, great ships traveling between galaxies, and everywhere, tall figures that looked almost human but different. Their eyes held starlight. "These were the predecessors," Zelandra said. "They came from the far future. They built the stargates. They taught us how to travel faster than light. They gave us the laws that govern energy and matter. But they were not aliens," the old council member continued. "They were human, like you." Deho stared at the images. "That's impossible. Humans only reached space 300 years ago." "Time is not a straight line," Zelandra said. "The predecessors came from a future that may never happen now. They traveled back to plant seeds, to prepare the galaxy for something terrible." The images in the pool changed. Deho saw darkness spreading between stars. Entire solar systems going silent. Planets turning to dust. "The silence," the old council member whispered. "It comes to devour all things. The predecessors tried to stop it in their time. They failed, so they came back to give us a chance." "What does this have to do with me?" Deho asked. But even as he spoke, more words in the strange language filled his mind, words that felt like they belonged there, You carry their memories, Zilandra said. Somehow their knowledge sleeps in your mind. When you heard our sacred chants, it began to wake up. A new voice spoke from behind them. Which is why we need to study him immediately. Everyone turned. A woman with short black hair stood in the doorway. She wore the uniform of a xenoarchaeologist. Her name tag read, Lee Hyejin. Dr. Lee, Captain Sora said, I thought you were still on Earth. I took the fastest ship I could find, Hyejin replied. When I heard what happened, I knew I had to come. I've spent 10 years studying predecessor sites. If this man really can speak their language. She walked toward Deho, her eyes bright with excitement. Can you understand these? She held up images on her tablet. Ancient symbols covered stone walls. Deho looked at them. The symbols seemed to shift and dance before his eyes. Slowly, meaning came to him. It's a warning, he said quietly. It says, the silence comes from the void between thoughts. Only united voices can turn it back. Dr. Lee nearly dropped her tablet. Incredible. We've had teams working on that inscription for years. There's more, Deho continued, the words flowing easier now. It says, we plant these words like seeds in the minds of our ancestors. When the time comes, they will remember what they never learned. The council chamber fell silent. Outside, Deho could hear the normal sounds of the ship, people talking, machines humming, life continuing as if the universe had not just changed. We need to go to the surface, Zilandra said finally. There are ruins there, places where the predecessors left their tools. If you can activate them... Is that safe? Captain Sora asked. Nothing is safe anymore, the old council member replied. The silence stirs in the deep places between galaxies. We have little time. 2 hours later, Deho stood on the surface of Kelthera. The ruins stretched as far as he could see. Towers of black stone reached toward the sky. Each one was covered in symbols that glowed faintly in the planet's double sunlight. Dr. Lee walked beside him, recording everything. These structures are older than any civilization we know, she said. We've never been able to power them up. They approached the largest tower. Its base was a perfect circle of smooth stone. At the center sat a chair that seemed to be carved from a single crystal. The Throne of Echoes, Zilandra said. Legend says that whoever sits there can speak to the past and future at once. Deho felt drawn to the chair. Each step toward it made the words in his mind clearer. When he finally sat down, the entire tower began to glow. Light raced up the walls. The symbols came alive, floating in the air around them. And in Deho's mind, voices began to speak, voices from across time itself. We are the predecessors, they said. We are what humanity becomes if it survives what is coming. The silence has already taken our future. Now we reach back to give you the tools we never had. Images filled the air. Star maps showing the path of the silence as it moved toward their galaxy. Weapon designs that used the fabric of space itself. And most important, instructions for speaking the first tongue. The language is not just words, the voices continued. It is reality speaking to itself. When spoken correctly, it can command matter and energy. It can turn back entropy itself. But the images began to fade. The voices grew distant. Remember, they whispered, you are not meant to face this alone. The strength of humanity was never in one voice, but in all voices singing together. The tower went dark. Deho slumped in the crystal chair, exhausted, but his mind was full of new knowledge, words of power, understanding of forces beyond imagination. What did you see? Dr. Lee asked, helping him stand. I saw the future, Deho replied. And I saw why the predecessors failed. They tried to be gods instead of teachers. Above them, something moved in the sky. A ship was approaching, but this was no ordinary vessel. It was vast and geometric, its surface covered in the same symbols that decorated the ruins. The archivist, Zelandra breathed. The predecessor's final creation. It has awakened. As the strange ship descended, Deho felt the words of the first, tongue growing stronger in his mind. The real test was about to begin. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within hours, every major species knew about the human who could speak the first tongue. Some called him a prophet. Others called him a threat. Deho sat in his quarters aboard the Harmony's edge, watching. The reports flow in. Ships from dozens of worlds were heading toward Kelthera. Some came to worship. Others came to destroy. Captain Sora paced the small room like a caged animal. "Earth Command wants you back immediately," she said. "They think you could give humanity the power to rule the galaxy." "I don't want to rule anything," Deho replied quietly. "I just want to understand what's happening to me." Dr. Lee looked up from her research tablet. "I've been studying the recordings from the ruins. The predecessors left more than just warnings. They left a complete guide to using the first tongue, but it's dangerous. Speaking it incorrectly could tear holes in reality itself." Through the window, they could see the archivist hanging in space above Kelthera. The massive ship had not moved since it arrived. It ignored all attempts at communication, except when Deho spoke to it in the first tongue. "What does it want?" Sora asked. "It's waiting," Deho said, "waiting for me to make a choice." The door chimed. Security Chief Minho entered with a grim expression. "We have a problem. 3 Vrokan warships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding we turn over the human." "The Vrokans?" Dr. Lee frowned. "Why would they care?" "Because they're terrified," Minho replied. "Their legends say the predecessors once made their gods kneel with a single word. They think humans are about to do the same thing." Alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Through the window they could see the angular forms of Vrokan battleships approaching. Their weapons were charged and ready. "Captain," the communication officer's voice came through the speakers. "The Vrokan commander is demanding to speak with you." On the main screen, a Vrokan general appeared. His scaled face was twisted with rage. "You harbor an abomination," he snarled. "Give us the human, or we will take him by force." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Captain Sora replied calmly. "Then you have chosen death," the general said. "Fire." Deho watched the missiles streak toward them. Without thinking, he spoke a word in the first tongue. "Halt." The missiles stopped. They hung in space like frozen stars. The Vrokan ship's engines went silent. Even their life support systems stopped working. "Release them," Dr. Lee said urgently. "If you kill them, every species in the galaxy will unite against humanity." Deho spoke another word. "Peace." The Vrokan ships came back to life. Their missiles turned to harmless light and faded away. On the screen, the general's eyes were wide with terror. "We withdraw," he whispered. "Forgive us, speaker of the first tongue." After the Vrokans left, the ship fell silent. Everyone stared at Deho with a mixture of awe and fear. "What have I become?" he asked Dr. Lee. "Something the galaxy has never seen before," she replied. The predecessors spoke of reality, as if it were a language. "You're learning to speak that language." More ships arrived throughout the day. The Keltheran Republic sent a science vessel. The Crystal Collective dispatched their eldest philosophers. Even the mysterious Voidwalkers emerged from their hiding places to observe. But not all the visitors were peaceful. That night, assassins from the Shadow Guild infiltrated the ship. They moved through the corridors like liquid darkness, their weapons designed to kill without leaving a trace. Deho woke to find one standing over his bed. The assassin raised a blade that seemed to drink light itself. "Nothing personal," the killer whispered. "But you're too dangerous to live. Sleep," Deho said in the first tongue. The assassin collapsed. Throughout the ship, all the other Shadow Guild members fell unconscious at the same moment. Security teams found them scattered through the corridors, their weapons useless. "This is getting out of hand," Captain Sora said the next morning. "Half the galaxy wants to worship you, the other half wants you dead." "There's something else," Dr. Lee added. "I've been analyzing the data from the ruins. The silence isn't just a natural phenomenon. It's intelligent, and it's closer than the predecessors thought. She showed them images from deep space telescopes. 3 galaxies have gone completely dark in the past year. The silence is consuming them from the inside out. How long do we have? Deho asked. Months, maybe weeks before it reaches the outer systems of our galaxy. The archivist suddenly came to life. Lights began to flash along its surface. A voice spoke directly into Deho's mind. It is time, the voice said. Come to me, inheritor. Learn what you must become. Deho stood up. I have to go to the archivist. Absolutely not, Captain Sora said. It could be a trap. Everything is a trap now, Deho replied. But I'm the only one who can spring it. An hour later, Deho found himself aboard the archivist. The ship's interior was like nothing he had ever seen. Corridors of living light stretched in all directions. Walls showed images of distant galaxies and impossible mathematics. At the center of the ship, a figure waited for him. It looked human, but its eyes held the depth of eternity. This was what the predecessors had become in their future. You are learning quickly, the figure said, but learning is not enough. The silence comes, and it will devour everything unless you accept your destiny. What destiny? Deho asked. To become what we became. To transcend your humanity and become a god of language itself. Only then can you speak the words that will save the galaxy. The figure raised its hand. Images filled the air around them. Deho saw himself transformed, his body made of pure energy, his voice capable of rewriting the laws of physics. This is what you must become, the figure said. This is the only way to stop the silence. But as Deho stared at the images, he felt something wrong about them. The transformed version of himself stood alone, isolated, cut off from everything that made him human. The predecessors failed, he said slowly. They became gods, but they forgot how to be human. That's why they couldn't stop the silence. The figure's expression changed. You do not understand. The power is everything. Without it, you are nothing. No, Deho said firmly. I'm a translator. My job is to help people understand each other. If I become a god, I can't do that anymore. Then you choose death, the figure said. For yourself, and for every living thing in the galaxy. Alarms began to sound throughout the archivist. On the screens, Deho could see new contacts appearing at the edge of the system, ships unlike anything in the known galaxy. They were dark and angular, and they seemed to absorb light itself. The silence has found us, the figure said. Its servants come to prepare the way. Choose now, inheritor. Become a god or watch everything. Die. Deho looked at the approaching ships. He thought of Captain Sora and Dr. Lee, of the Kelthani who had helped him understand his gift, of all the different species who had set aside their differences to learn about the first tongue. There's a third option, he said quietly. One you never considered? What option? Teaching others to speak the first tongue, not becoming a god, but making everyone a little bit divine. The figure stared at him in shock. Impossible. The first tongue cannot be taught. It must be inherited. Maybe that's what you believed, Deho said. But I'm going to try something different. He turned and walked toward the archivist's communication array. It was time to speak to the galaxy. Deho's voice reached every corner of the galaxy. The archivist's communication array was more powerful than anything built by the current civilizations. His words traveled instantly across millions of light years. My name is Deho Park, he said in the first tongue, then repeated it in Standard Galactic. I am not a god, I am not a prophet, I am a translator, and I want to teach you all a new language. On thousands of worlds, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. In the great halls of the Kelthani Empire, silver-faced priests wept as they heard the sacred tongue spoken freely for the first time in eons. In the deep caves of the Vrokan homeworld, warriors who had never known fear felt something stir in their hearts. The silence comes to destroy us all, Deho continued. But we don't have to face it alone. The predecessors tried to save the galaxy by becoming gods. They failed because gods stand apart from those they protect. We're going to try something different. On the bridge of the Harmony's edge, Captain Sora watched her communications board light up with responses from across the galaxy. "Daiho," she said into her microphone, "you've got the attention of every major fleet in known space. Half of them are coming here to help. The other half are coming to stop you." Dr. Lee worked frantically at her station. "The silent ships are getting closer. I count at least 50 of them now. They're unlike anything in our databases. They seem to bend space around themselves." Security Chief Minho coordinated the defense. Ships from dozens of species were arriving at Kelthera. Some came to protect Daiho. Others came to destroy him before he could unleash powers they didn't understand. "This is madness," the predecessor figure said aboard the Archivist. "You will start a war that will tear the galaxy apart." "Maybe," Daiho replied. "But the galaxy is going to be torn apart anyway if we don't try something new." He began to teach. Using the Archivist systems, he broadcast lessons in the first tongue to anyone willing to listen. The language was hard to learn. It required not just memorizing words, but understanding the deep connections between thought and reality. Dr. Lee was among the first to grasp the basics. When she spoke her first word in the first tongue, a flower made of pure light bloomed in her hands. "Incredible," she breathed. "I can feel the universe listening to me." More students followed. Captain Sora learned words of protection that could shield her ship from enemy fire. Minho discovered phrases that could strengthen armor and weapons. Even some of the alien delegates began to understand. But the lessons came with a price. More people learned the first tongue. The more attention they drew from the silence. The dark ships moved faster now, as if hungry for the new voices speaking the ancient words. "They fear what we're doing," Daiho realized. "The silence feeds on emptiness, on the spaces between things. When people speak the first tongue together, those spaces fill with meaning." The first battle began at the edge of the Kelthera system. A mixed fleet of human, Kelthani, and Vrokan ships faced off against the servants of the silence. The dark vessels moved like living shadows, their weapons turning matter into nothingness. "Our shields are failing," Captain Sora reported. "Their weapons are unlike anything we've seen." "Use the words I taught you," Daiho said. "Speak them together." Across the fleet, hundreds of voices began to chant in the first tongue. The words were simple ones. Words for light, for strength, for unity. But when spoken together, they created something greater than the sum of their parts. The dark ships slowed. Their weapons became less effective. Some of them actually began to retreat. "It's working," Dr. Lee said in amazement. "The silent ships can't handle multiple voices speaking the first tongue at once." But the victory was temporary. More dark ships appeared, bigger ones. And from the deepest reaches of space came something else entirely. "By all the gods," whispered High Priestess Ilandra. "What is that?" It looked like a hole in space itself, a void so complete that it hurt to look at. As it approached, stars began to dim. Planets lost their color. Even thoughts became harder to form. "The silence itself," the predecessor figure said grimly. "Not just its servants, but the thing itself. You have forced it to show its true face." The void began to speak. Its voice was the sound of civilizations dying, of hopes being extinguished, of the last words spoken in dead languages. "You teach them to sing," it said, "but in the end all songs fade to silence. All meanings become meaningless. All light becomes darkness." "You're wrong," Daiho replied. He could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on his mind, trying to make him forget why he was fighting. "Meaning doesn't come from one voice. It comes from many voices together." "Then let us test your theory," the silence said. The void expanded. It began to consume the outer planets of the Kelthera system. Everything it touched simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, but erased from reality, as if it had never been. Panic spread through the defending fleets. Some ships tried to flee. Others fired weapons that had no effect on the approaching nothingness. "We need more voices," Deho said desperately. "Everyone who can speak the first tongue needs to speak it now." But there weren't enough. Despite his teaching, only a few hundred beings had learned even the basics of the ancient language. Against the vast emptiness of the silence, their voices seemed pitifully small. "I told you," the predecessor figure said. "Only by transcending your humanity can you hope to match this power." Deho felt the temptation. He could feel the archivists' systems offering him unlimited power. He could become a god, speak words that would reshape reality itself, drive back the silence through pure force. But as the temptation grew stronger, he heard something else. Quiet voices speaking simple words in the first tongue. Dr. Lee was teaching a group of human engineers. Captain Sora was working with Kelthani priests. Even Security Chief Minho was showing Vrokan warriors how to pronounce the ancient syllables. The lessons were spreading, not just among those who had come to Kelthera, but across the galaxy. The archivists' broadcasts had reached billions of beings. Most couldn't understand the first tongue yet, but some could, and they were teaching others. "You're right," Deho said to the predecessor figure. "I can't match the silence's power alone, but I don't have to." He opened a new channel on the archivist's communication system. This time, he didn't speak to the galaxy's leaders or its warriors. He spoke to everyone. "I know you're afraid," he said. "I know the darkness looks too big to fight. But you don't have to be heroes. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to speak. Say the words I'm teaching you. Say them with your neighbors, with your families, with strangers you've never met." He began to teach the simplest word in the first tongue, the word for together. Across the galaxy, billions of voices began to speak. The effect was immediate. The advancing void slowed. For the first time since its arrival, the silence seemed uncertain. "What is this?" it demanded. "This is what the predecessors never understood," Deho replied. "Power doesn't come from standing above others. It comes from standing with them." The word together echoed from countless worlds spoken in countless voices. And with each voice that joined the chorus, the silence grew smaller. But the battle was far from over. The void began to fight back, sending waves of despair and hopelessness across the galaxy. Some voices fell silent. Some lost faith. It would take everything they had learned and everything they had yet to discover to face what came next. The silence fought back with everything it had. Waves of despair washed across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, people stopped speaking the first tongue as hopelessness filled their hearts. Some forgot why they had started speaking at all. Deho felt each voice that fell silent like a physical blow. Through the archivist's systems, he was connected to every being trying to learn the ancient language. When they gave up, part of him gave up too. "It's not enough," he said to Dr. Lee through the communication link. "The silence is too strong. It's making people forget what they're fighting for." "Then remind them," she replied. Her voice was steady, despite the chaos around them. "That's what translators do, right? We help people understand each other." Deho looked at the screens showing the silence's advance. 3 more star systems had gone dark. The void was feeding on the despair it created, growing stronger with each world that lost hope. "There has to be another way," he said to the predecessor figure. "You traveled back in time to give us this chance. There must be something you didn't try." The figure's eternal eyes showed doubt for the first time. "We tried everything. We became gods. We spoke words that could reshape reality. We commanded the very forces of creation. But did you ever try being human?" The figure paused. "What do you mean?" "You became gods to fight the silence. But gods don't need help. They don't need friends. They don't need anyone else." Deho gestured toward the screen showing the mixed fleets defending Kelthara. "Look at this. Humans and Kelthani working together. Vrokans and Crystal Collective ships sharing shield harmonics. Enemies becoming allies because they're all learning the same language. Unity is not enough," the figure said. "The silence is beyond such simple concepts." "Is it?" Daeho asked. Or is that just what it wants us to believe? He opened a new channel to the entire galaxy. This time he didn't speak in the first tongue. He spoke in simple words that anyone could understand. I know you're scared, he said. I'm scared too. The darkness looks so big that it seems impossible to fight. But I want to tell you something about the silence. It's not stronger than us, it's emptier than us. On the bridge of the Harmony's edge, Captain Sora watched the communication boards. Daeho's broadcast is reaching every inhabited system. Response signals are coming in from everywhere. The silence consumes meaning, Daeho continued. It feeds on emptiness, on the spaces between people, on the silence between words. But what happens when there are no empty spaces left? He began to teach again. Not complex words of power, but simple phrases. I am here. You are not alone. We stand together. The effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, people began to speak. Not just the first tongue, but their own languages too. Humans spoke to Kelthani. Vrokans shared stories with Crystal Collective, philosophers. Species that had been enemies for centuries began to talk to each other. The silence writhed. For the first time since its arrival, it actually retreated. The void that had been consuming the outer planets began to shrink. It's working, Dr. Lee reported. The silence is pulling back. But the victory was temporary. The void gathered itself for one final assault. It rushed toward Kelthera like a tsunami of nothingness, ready to devour everything in its path. All ships, Captain Sora ordered. Form a defensive line. Prepare for final battle. The mixed fleet arranged itself between the silence and Kelthara. Human ships linked shields with Kelthani vessels. Vrokan battleships shared their weapon systems with Crystal Collective explorers. For the first time in galactic history, every major species was working as one. Together, Daeho said in the first tongue. The word was picked up by every person on every ship. Then it spread beyond the fleet, carried by the archivist's communication systems to every world that could hear. Together, said billions of voices, across the galaxy. The silence struck the defensive line like a hammer blow. Ships began to disappear, erased from existence. But as each vessel fell, others moved to fill the gap. The line held. It's not enough, the predecessor figure said. The silence is too strong. You need the power of godhood to stop it. No, Daeho replied. I need something better than godhood. I need friends. He reached out through the archivist's systems, connecting his mind to every person speaking the first tongue. Dr. Lee was there, still teaching new students even as her ship shook under the silence's assault. Captain Sora was there, coordinating the defense while learning ancient words. Security Chief Min-Ho was there, discovering that the strongest armor was the trust between allies. Thousands of voices joined the network. Then millions. Then billions. Each one adding their own strength to the whole. This is what you never understood, Daeho said to the silence. You think emptiness is stronger than fullness, but when people come together, when they share their voices and their hopes and their dreams, there's no room left for emptiness. The network of voices began to speak in unison, not just the first tongue, but every language in the galaxy. A symphony of meaning that filled every empty space, every silence, every void. The silence writhed and twisted, trying to find purchase in the network of voices, but everywhere it reached it found more words, more connections, more meaning. This is impossible, it whispered. All things must end in silence. Not today, Daeho replied. Today we choose to keep talking. The silence began to fade, not destroyed but transformed. The emptiness between words became filled with potential. The void between thoughts became a place where new ideas could grow. It's working, Dr. Lee said in amazement. The silence is becoming something else, something that creates instead of destroys. The battle was over. The void retreated to the deep places between galaxies, no longer hungry but somehow satisfied. The dark ships faded like shadows at dawn. On the bridge of the Harmony's edge, Captain Sora watched the scanner displays return to normal. All ships, report safe. The silence has withdrawn. It's not gone, Deho said, returning from the archivist to rejoin his friends. It's still out there, but it's not empty anymore. We filled it with our voices. What happens now? Dr. Lee asked. Deho looked at the mixed fleet around them. Ships from dozens of species. Their crews still talking to each other in the first tongue and their own languages. The communication channels buzzed with conversations that had never happened before. Now we keep talking, he said. We keep teaching. We keep learning from each other. The silence fed on emptiness, but we've filled the galaxy with voices. And you? The predecessor figure asked, appearing on the bridge as a hologram. What becomes of the man who could have been a god? Deho smiled. I go back to being what I always was, a translator. I help people understand each other. It's not a small job anymore, though. I've got a whole galaxy to teach. Years later, Deho sat in a simple classroom on Earth. His students were young humans learning their first words in the first tongue. But his classroom was connected to thousands of others across the galaxy. Human children learned alongside Kelthani youngsters. Vrokan cubs practiced pronunciation with crystal collective crystals. Teacher, one of his students asked, "Why didn't you become a god when you had the chance?" Deho considered the question. Through the window, he could see ships from a dozen species coming and going from Earth's orbital stations. The galaxy had become a much more talkative place. Because gods don't need teachers, he said finally. They already know everything. But translators, we're always learning. We're always finding new ways to help people understand each other. He looked at his mixed class of students. And there's always more to translate. The universe is full of voices that haven't met each other yet. Our job is to help them find each other. The student nodded thoughtfully. Is that why they call you the speaker of the first tongue? Actually, Deho said with a smile, I prefer my old title. I was just the translator. Until I learned that being just a translator meant being the bridge between all voices in the galaxy. Outside, more ships arrived. More voices joined the endless conversation that had replaced the silence. And in classrooms across the galaxy, students learned that the most powerful words were not commands to reality, but invitations to understanding.